Hey guys, Jason here with a Duel Masters mail day video. We have not done one of these types of videos in a very long time, and well, I just got an itch to buy some Duel Masters cards, and so I feel like sharing it with you guys. I think it's been well over a year since our last mail day video, and this is a pretty big haul, if I do say so myself. I ended up getting a lot more cards, and in the interest of saving time, I actually removed all of them from the plastic that they came in so we can get through this in a decent amount of time. So without further ado, let's jump in. So starting things off, we've got 4 copies of Juliana. Now, Juliana is one of those cards that I think has retained its value pretty well on the secondary market, at least as the OG era non-foils go. Quite similar to Bellix, to be honest. Like Bellix, Juliana did not receive any reprints to the best of my knowledge, at least as at the time of recording. Truth be told, I didn't actually need additional copies of Juliana, but I just came across them at a good price, and I figured, hey, why not? So, speaking of light civilization cards, this next one was a lot of mini foils. So we've got one Glenavule, we've got some Balza Seeker of Hyper Pearls. I'm pretty sure I ordered more. I'm pretty sure this came with 4. All right, here's the 4th one. Got Rimuel, Invincible Aura, I think. I don't even remember this guy, and you know, this dude is a foil from the DM10 set. I'm pretty sure it is. Some Channeler of Suns fellow. The reason I purchased this listing was for the Balza Seeker of Hyper Pearls. It's not a particularly remarkable card, 8 mana, 4,000, at least not in my opinion. But it does have Shield Trigger Blocker, and it is the strongest Shield Trigger Blocker in the TCG card pool. The reason I got this was because I was inspired by Mr. Bazet's Turbo Mana Burn IDC winning list, and I felt like, hey, you know, if we want to experiment with some anti-aggro shield trigger tech, maybe this guy is somebody worth playing around with. Burst Shot could wipe our own board, gets rid of soul swap targets, maybe not the best, and it doesn't really address creatures over a certain power level anyway. And with Aqua Surfer, well, Aqua Surfer is pretty good, but this guy stays on the field and you can use him multiple times in a sense. So yeah, there you go. Funnily enough, I was considering this guy for our Turbo Bejula deck, and I ended up cutting him from the list because there was no space, but there you go. All right, moving on. The next set of cards that I got, we've got 1 copy of Fairy Life, and then 4 copies of Poisonous Mushroom, and 4 copies of Bronze Arm Tribe. I guess I was thinking I got 3 different cards here. Now, Poisonous Mushroom is a card that I am stocking up on. I think the dude just threw in this 1 copy of Fairy Life for free. I don't remember buying any Fairy Life, but to be honest, it uses the old border, which I'm a fan of, and I love me some Fairy Life, so I'm pretty happy about that. This entire listing did not cost significantly more than just buying a playset of Poisonous Mushroom alone, so I figured, yeah, you know, I guess I could use the extra Bronze Arm. Why not? All right, coming up next, we have got 4 copies of Aqua Hulkus. I am not generally a fan of the new borders. I prefer the old borders much more, not just from an aesthetic perspective, but it is also consistent with the TCG cards. Unfortunately for Aqua Hulkus, I think the only old border printing was from base set, and base set Aqua Hulkus are pretty expensive and pretty hard to come by, so I figured, you know what, I'm not really willing to pay the premium on that, so might as well just go the newer route and pay 300 yen for a playset of this guy. I say pay 300 yen, but when you factor in the service fee of the Japanese shopping services, it's like more like 550 yen. But anyway. Next card, we've got more copies of Poisonous Mushroom. This is the alternate art version, and to the best of my knowledge is the only alternate art version of Poisonous Mushroom. Okay, actually that's not entirely true. I think there's also another printing with the OG art, but with different coloration, but in terms of a different image, yeah, I think this is the only one. This was released in set 18, I believe, which was the reprint set covering the first era of Duel Masters. Something to that effect, anyway. Alright, moving on. 4 copies of Hide and Seek we have. So Hide and Seek is a card that I don't actually think too highly of. I don't think it's particularly good. And I do know that we did have a playset of Hide and Seek. It's one of the few multi-civ cards which we have English copies of. Unfortunately, I have misplaced them. I can't seem to find them. So I figured, yeah, let's just buy another playset. It's not too expensive. I know I did say Hide and Seek is not particularly impressive to me, but I think Hide and Seek can be pretty useful in certain decks. If you're not running fire and you want some removal that doesn't come out too late into the game, I think Hide and Seek is pretty reasonable. And I think it can also slot into decks that need to fix their feng shui. It's pretty good for mana from a certain point of view, and I think it can also work well alongside Phantasmal Horror Gigazald, which I have been brainstorming on and off. Speaking of which, we have 4 copies of Giga Rays. This is another card that I'm pretty sure we have, but I cannot seem to find. I think Giga Rays is a pretty cool card. Phantasmal Horror Gigazald decks are most likely going to be built as Water and Darkness, at least in my opinion. So this guy is a pretty good fit for that because he can get the water creatures, generate advantage in a sense, and then he also acts as Evo bait. I think this guy can also work in aggro-centric decks which use the colors. So dark water fire aggro or dark fire nature aggro maybe. I think this guy could be a pretty good fit. The next card I procured, or the next playset of cards I procured, I should say, 4 copies of Apocalypse Vice. This is the gift that keeps on giving. I think Apocalypse Vice is just really good, and because our environment, the way we like to play has gravitated towards heavy mana ramp, the downsides of Apocalypse Vice are not really felt, so we are just squeezing it into as many decks as we can. Next up, we've got 4 copies of Morbid Medicine. Yeah, it's pretty much always 4 copies because with these low value cards, they tend to sell them in sets. Morbid Medicine is a card that I thought I had more copies of. And in my brainstorming, I have been wanting to incorporate Morbid Medicine into more deck lists as a means of generating card advantage outside of the Water Civ. I think I would have mentioned before that Morbid Medicine is in some ways like a darkness energy stream, at least if you apply some mental gymnastics to it. And yeah, I wanted to experiment with Morbid Medicine in Hydrus, and Hydro Hurricane, and Wave Strikers, and I think it would be a good candidate in some more experimental decks. On the subject of 4 mana spells, we've got 4 copies of Volcano Charger and 4 copies of Corpse Charger. So this was a listing that came with all 8 cards. I was also stocking up on more copies of Volcano Charger. If you watched our video deck lists for your favorite evolutions, Volcano Charger is finding its way into a lot of decks. And I think control decks just really need Volcano Charger, and as we are experimenting with more control-oriented deck lists, alongside more turbo-oriented deck lists, the likes of Balisk Baj, Uber Dragon Bajula, more copies of Volcano Charger are just necessary. Next up, we've got 4 more copies of Volcano Charger, so don't worry, I know this isn't the most exciting card, and this is going to be the last time you will come across Volcano Charger in this video, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, as I said, we need more copies of Volcano Charger. Hopefully this is the last time that I'm going to have to buy additional copies of this card. Up next, we've got a very exciting card. A lot of these are just sweaty, try-hard staples, or at least non-foils. Next card, we've got 2 copies of Balam, Master of Death. Oh yeah! So this Balam came out in the reprint set. I think it might be the same set as this Poisonous Mushroom. But yeah, I am wanting to experiment with a Balam deck, and yeah, I just wanted to pick up some copies of Balam. I think this artwork is pretty cool. To be honest, I wasn't really thinking when I purchased this listing, because when it comes to Balam, I would like to play the original artwork. Doesn't necessarily have to be the DM4 printing, but there is just something so right about using the original artwork, which we also got in the TCG. This guy just looked pretty cool though. I tend to like the alternate art reprints from DM18, so I had to pick up a copy. To be honest though, if I do end up pursuing the Balam deck, I am most likely going to buy additional copies, and these are just going to go in a folder. In which case I didn't need to, but I think this was a pretty good deal at the time, so yeah. Alright, up next, we are keeping up with the excitement. We've got some non-OCG cards. We've got 4 copies of Photoside Lord of the Wastes, or as it says here, Photoside Seigneur des Déchets? I don't know, man. I can't pronounce French. But yeah, I found these copies of French Photoside. As is the custom when I talk about a card that Damien put on our radar, I must give Damien a shout out. Damien was a big proponent of Photoside, and in our early testing, Photoside went into a lot of janky decks. Some very sweaty, not very elegant, water, light, dark, control-oriented builds. Some funky Alcadius concepts or early versions of deck out. Now, Photoside is a card that I am beginning to like more and more with the passage of time. Naturally, Photoside pairs well with Balam. I think it's a great Evo bait for a Balam deck, but I also think Photoside might be a pretty good tech in some of the more generic sweaty tryhard decks. Like think Water, Dark, Fire, mid-range builds, Water, Dark, Fire, Nature, swap box type decks. I feel like a single copy of Photoside could help with some of the more difficult matchups. I know those kinds of decks tend to struggle with the newer age or more IDC relevant decks like control decks with light, like Fortress Burn, Hydro Hurricane, even Warlord Elzonius, which I realize is not a control deck. But yeah, I think Photoside may be able to help in those matchups. Maybe one Photoside is not enough, but I have played some matchups where the Photoside just stuck and it was a very difficult time. Who knows? Now, from the same seller who was selling a lot of TCG cards, I also procured myself 4 copies of Cavern Raider. Cavern Raider is a card that I don't think is very good, and I think this was a moment of weakness. At the time, I was brainstorming concepts for Mikey's Pliers, and I figured, well, Cavern Raider is a way to generate card advantage for that deck outside of Rumbling Terrahorn. If you're able to play it when you have Pliers out, it can swing right away and it effectively replaces itself. In saying that, I don't think Cavern Raider is particularly good. But I suppose you could also say that this is a common, and it is a card that I came across a lot in my youth, and you could say that it bothered me to not have a playset of it. Next up, we've got more copies of Apocalypse Vice. Yep, I've spoken about this card a lot. Apocalypse Vice is pretty good. And then carrying on, we've got 4 more copies of Apocalypse Vice. So I really am hoping that this is the last time I ever have to buy additional copies of Apocalypse Vice. In the past, I thought this was a card that you only needed 2 copies of per deck. But then as I experiment, as I brainstorm, as I playtest, or at least as I playtested back when we were doing the TCG seasons, I felt, 3 copies of Apocalypse Vice in a deck is pretty good. I think some decks even ran 4, like the old Twin Cannon Turbo list. But yeah, Apocalypse Vice is going into decks in pretty high numbers. It's no longer just a 1 or 2 of, so I felt that more copies were necessary. Similar to Volcano Charger, I also felt that Apocalypse Vice could serve decks of different playstyles. You could have it in the sweaty control decks, but you could also have it in the more aggro-centric turbo mana acceleration decks. Don't worry, no more Apocalypse Vice. Instead, we have 4 copies of Gajira Butte Vile Centurion. Gajira Butte, like Hide and Seek and Giga Rays, is a card that I'm pretty sure I already have 4 copies of, but I seem to have misplaced the other copies. And when I got excited while brainstorming the Balam deck, I was like, I gotta get some more copies of Gajira Butte. They weren't too expensive, so actually I shouldn't even say they weren't too expensive. They were actually very cheap, and I got the original printing in pretty good condition, which I am pretty happy with. So there's my additional playset of Gajira Butte. He is reunited with his dad Balam and his brother Photoside, and they are going to try to make a workable deck together. I also really like Gajira Butte. I like these Bolmedius style cards. I think the best way to use Gajira Butte, at least under my artistic vision, is in a Balam deck, but I'm pretty sure people have experimented with Gajira Butte in other decks to varying levels of success, like miraculous rebirth-oriented decks with multiple civs, like, I don't know, fire, nature, darkness, and then also I think in water, darkness, nature builds, but I don't think he's that good in that sort of deck. But yeah. Next, we have a peculiar purchase, 4 copies of Searing Wave. Yeah, when I first looked at this, I was like, why did I buy this again? And then I remembered it's because the Armorloids deck is almost entirely Japanese. The only non-Japanese cards in that deck are Searing Wave, and I'm a little bit fussy. You know, I like things to be the same or similar where possible, and so I decided, yeah, let's get some additional copies of Searing Wave so we can make that deck all Japanese. I think it makes for a much nicer aesthetic. And then we've got 4 copies of Melnia the Aqua Shadow. I don't know why I always say 4 copies. It's like, how many copies would there be? Suppose there were 2 Balams and like there are some one-offs here. But yeah, most of these do come in 4s. We've got 4 copies of Melnia in fantastic condition. Yeah, I'm pretty pleased with the condition of these cards. Melnia, like Hide and Seek, like Gajira Butte, like Giga Rays, is a card that I'm pretty sure we already had a playset of, but I can't seem to find the playset, so had to rebuy them. I don't have a solid concept for Melnia, to be honest. I know there is a very strong Water Darkness Rush deck, which does well in IDC tournaments, or at least has done well in IDC tournaments. But I think that is a little bit too close in concept to our Mono Water Liquid People Rush deck. And because we are so enamored with that concept, and dare I say, that concept is kind of associated with our channel, I didn't really want to stray away from that. So yeah, maybe Melnia might be able to go in a random funky deck alongside Giga Rays, or maybe we can fit some copies into Hydrus. I did come up with a Hydrus list in that Your Favorite Evolutions video, which incorporates a few copies of Melnia, and many people on the internet include Melnia in Hydrus lists. Next up, speaking of liquid people, we have 4 copies of Aqua Guard with the new border. This may seem like a strange purchase given what I shared with Aqua Hulkus over here. Now there's a story for why I bought this. Several months ago, actually not even several months ago, a couple years ago, I was going through some spare cards and I realized that I was able to make an additional copy of our Mono Water Rush deck, save for the copies of Crystal Paladin. And I thought that was pretty cool. And most of the cards in that list happen to have the new border, with the exception being Aqua Guard. So I realized, yeah, I am very fussy. I want everything to look consistent with each other. So I figured it's just a few hundred yen. I'll buy a playset of Aqua Guard and I can make that deck look more aesthetically pleasing. Now, what am I going to do with that deck? Maybe it'll be nice to have that deck handy because I don't have all of the decks in my custody at the moment. So if I happen to meet up with a Duel Masters player, I don't know how that would come about, but if the situation were ever to arise, at least I would have a deck to play with. Or maybe it could be a gift to someone. I don't know. But yeah, that's why I bought this. All right, the last repeat entry. I've got 4 copies of Poisonous Mushroom. Yeah, this is a very similar purchase to Volcano Charger and Apocalypse Vice, I think. I guess the flavor of the month for me, for lack of a better term, is the turbo-oriented evolution decks. The likes of Balisk Baj, Bajula, even Alcadius to an extent. Poisonous Mushroom seems to just jive very well in those sorts of decks, but it also goes well in some of the sweatier try-hard decks, like Lost Soul Beat, like Swap Box, like Bombazar Blue, or if I want to fashion something after Bombazar Blue, I don't know. Poisonous Mushroom is just a very useful card to have around. And, well, if I'm randomly deck building, it would be nice for me to have everything I need at my disposal. We've got 2 more cards. Second to the last one, we've got Magma Dragon Balga Geyser. This is a very interesting card. And I know I say interesting a lot, but I think this one is particularly more interesting. It is intriguing because it came out in the TCG era of sets. We cover this card in more detail in one of our old mini-series called TCG Unreleased, I think it is. And that series covered cards released in the OCG, which never made their way to the TCG, but they were released alongside the first 12 sets in Japan. So in my mind, this card very much belongs in the TCG card pool. If my memory has not failed me, this guy's effect is that when he attacks, you can look at the top card of your deck, and if it is a dragon, you can put it into the battle zone. This is one of the few cheat creatures into play effects that exists in the first 12 to 13 sets, and I think if we were wanting to extend our TCG card pool, this guy is a very reasonable candidate. Certainly a very interesting card. I don't think he's changed too much from Duel Masters plays, and I think this guy did see some play in DMP in the first format or two. And saving the best for last, or at least the most aesthetically pleasing for last, we have got Divine Destruction Dragon Mech Galzark. I think this guy is a super cool card. I love the artwork. It looks so cool. I'll try to bring it closer to the camera. I'm not sure if the lighting is going to do it justice. I hope it does, but yeah, take a look. This guy is super awesome. I, of course, know this guy like many cards, like his cousin/brother Balga from Duel Masters plays. This guy came out in set 3, I believe, and was extremely degenerate. He was a lot more powerful than DMP. He had a whole smorgasbord of powerful effects, and he was played in a Dark Fire Nature Dragon deck. Now, he's nowhere near as good in the OCG as he is in Duel Masters plays, but I thought he would be cool to have nonetheless. Now, what will most likely happen is I might experiment with him in some deck, and then I will realize it's just not workable, so he will be relegated to the binder. Similar to Magma Dragon Balga Geyser, I think this guy is a card we can include in our card pool should we feel like it. If you take a closer look at the set symbol here, this is the DM13 set symbol, and we actually cover this guy in our TCG Unreleased series. If I'm not mistaken, this guy came out as a promo at around the time of DM13, and so under Season 3 rules, I think this guy is a very reasonable inclusion in the card pool. With those promos, a lot of the promos they released at that time were cards that were part of the main sets. I know Queen Maiden was a promo for DM13, but there were promos that did not make it into the main sets. Some of their names escape me, though Divine Machine Armor Valborg for set 2 is one that comes to mind. And that brings me to the end of the card portion of this video. But if you've stuck around for this long, there's another cool thing I want to show you. So I'll just pack this up and I'll be right back. So it's not cards. What could it possibly be? It is my new Duel Masters Plays themed playmat. As you know, there were DMP events in Japan which gave cool merch as rewards, and this is one of them. I consider this as being from the same series as the Shobu playmat. This is obviously from Plays Arena. I'm pretty sure this is from Plays Arena as well. And I really like how these playmats are fashioned. You know, they really are designed to go together in my opinion. You've got the main character over here on the side, but you know, when you're playing against an opponent, you turn it upside down. So, you know, they're all opposite ends, which is cool. And then they've got their key creature supporting them. Shobu's got more than one. He's got Balsaf, he's got Kokolupia. Obviously, he's wanting to fight with Balsaf. And then Kokujo has Dorbalum, who is ready to wipe Shobu's board. It's also very fitting because I'm pretty sure that Dorbalum and Balmedia Sapphire did come out at around the same time. At the very least in DMP they did. And yeah, I think this is just really awesome. This is also not a reproduction. I've got the official paperwork over here, so I'm pretty happy about that. I am going to keep the paper. I'm pretty sure I still have the paperwork from Shobu. There actually is a third playmat in this series, and that features Hakuo, but I don't quite like it as much because there are no creatures present in that artwork. It looks like some spell effect, could be like Holy Awe or Heaven's Gate or something, but it doesn't quite have the same visual effect. And anyway, you know, Duel Masters is designed to be a 1v1 game, so you only need 2 playmats. And that brings me to the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I feel like these mail days are potentially most effective and most enjoyable when they happen infrequently. I guess the analytics will tell, but I hope you guys found this entertaining. Anyway, that's all for now, so thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.